300-pound dudes tackling you on a frozen field, the last thing you want to do is stay out there. Believe me, the Rams players were thinking about the jacuzzi at their team hotel, that they find it laughable, but more laughable if they totally disregard the trade whatsoever. This guy has transformed the balance of power in the Eastern Conference. And you could argue the entire defense is going to be absolutely ferocious next year. But if your number one priority is to win a Super Bowl, then J.J. Watt is making a grave mistake. To ride this Chad Henne experiment for an entire game, I might need a whole bottle of Hennessy just to get through that. Guy who's won 8 division titles, who's made 5 AFC championship appearances, who's reached the Super Bowl 3 times and has won 2 Super Bowls for this organization. Aaron Rodgers has only won 1 Super Bowl with Green Bay. Drew Brees has only won 1 Super Bowl with New Orleans. There's only 13 quarterbacks in NFL history that have won multiple Super Bowls, and Big Ben is one of those individuals. Good morning and welcome to Morning Joe right here on J&J Media Network, Facebook Live, Twitter, and on YouTube. I'm Jonah Malkin with you every single Monday and Wednesday morning, 11 a.m. to 12 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, 10 to 11 Central, and 8 to 9 a.m. Pacific. Glad you could join me on a Wednesday morning. A lot to discuss, a lot of news in the NBA surrounding Jalen Brunson, Knicks, Mavericks, Serena Williams losing in the first round at Wimbledon. I'm going to touch on all of that, but I have to start with what I began the show teasing, and that's Jalen Brunson and the New York Knicks. So apparently, Jalen Brunson is expected to leave the Mavericks to ultimately sign with the New York Knicks. The Knicks are likely to offer Jalen Brunson a 4-year, 110 in the range of $110 million offer once free agency begins. Now, obviously, as of right now, Dallas has shown an unwillingness to match the 4-year commitment for $110 million. What they're willing to do is 5 years at $110 million, essentially the difference in $6 million per year. Okay, because under the Knicks' offer, Jalen Brunson would be making about $28 million per season, as opposed to the Mavericks that are trying to offer him $22 million over the course of 5 years. Now, just for some context and some comparison, Chris Paul's making about $28 million, 28.4. Kyle Lowry is making 28.3. So that's clearly where the Knicks are viewing Jalen Brunson. And the interesting thing about the Knicks, they've clearly made their intentions about Jalen Brunson flagrantly obvious. They signed, or they hired his father, Rick Brunson, to be an assistant coach. In fact, the Knicks president, Leon Rose, has a relationship with the Brunson family. He represented Rick Brunson when he was a player, and when Leon Rose was an agent, he represented Jalen Brunson during the beginning of his career for Jalen, the first couple of seasons of his career before he became the president of the Knicks. So there is a history there. Not to mention, they just traded Nerlens Noel and Alec Burks to create additional cap space. They traded away Kemba to save an additional $9 million. They created about $30 million in cap space to go after and target Jalen Brunson. So Brunson has clearly been their number one offseason target. I think that when you look at some of the other free agents that are out there, yes, they were rumored to be interested in Kyrie, but that Kyrie option only became available potentially as of the last couple of days. The Utah Jazz have been pretty adamant about their unwillingness to trade away Donovan Mitchell. Not sure what the status is on Rudy Gobert, but they've been unwilling to trade away Donovan Mitchell. At least they haven't expressed anything that would make us believe that the Mavericks would have a package good enough to trade for a guy like Donovan Mitchell. So you take away those two guys, the only one remaining is Bradley Beal, and I think it's unlikely that the Wizards would trade Bradley Beal, not to mention who knows what's in the head of Bradley Beal, if he wants to stay, if he wants to leave, if he wants to sign the Supermax. There's uncertainty in that situation. So the only surefire bet for the Knicks was Jalen Brunson. This is the guy that we're after. This is who we think is the next big piece that we need to sign. And Jalen Brunson, listen, this is a young guy. He's 25 years old, and he's cashing in on the best season of his career. This was the best season he has had individually as an NBA player. He averaged 16 points per game, 4 rebounds, 5 assists in the regular season, 50% from the floor, 37% from the three-point range. And he especially shined in the postseason. Those first 3 games in the postseason against the Utah Jazz with no Luka Doncic, Jalen Brunson carried the Mavs. He led them to a 2-1 series lead, dropping 41 points, 31 points in those 2 victories. And in the entire postseason, his points jumped up from 16 in the regular season to 21.5 in the postseason. A couple more rebounds, 1 less assist, slightly dipped in the shooting percentage, but again, he was asked to do a lot more. And so he proved his worth in this past postseason for the Dallas Mavericks, and clearly he's been their second best player. He had been their second best player in last season. And so this is a guy that literally just joined the starting lineup on a permanent basis in December. And so for me, when I look at, okay, Jalen Brunson and the New York Knicks, well, obviously Jalen Brunson, him leaving potentially Dallas to go sign with the Knicks has nothing to do with a dislike for Dallas, a dislike for Luka, or any of his teammates in the Dallas Mavericks organization. I think that this is a guy who's part of the same draft class as Luka Doncic. He appreciates Luka. He appreciates everything that Luka has meant for his career and the opportunities that Luka has afforded him. But this is a guy in Jalen Brunson who clearly believes that, listen, I'm appreciative of everything Luka has done for me in my career. I won't forget that. But he probably believes, based on how he performed in the postseason, that he deserves a shot to flourish in a slightly bigger role, even though, yes, he was the number 2 guy, but really it was a heliocentric offense with the Mavericks. It was pretty much run through Luka. And perhaps Jalen Brunson feels he can be a more integral piece with the Knicks. And he feels like he deserves the chance to do that. We've seen examples of this before. Jeremy Grant left the Nuggets to go get paid a little bit more and sign with the Detroit Pistons. Didn't necessarily work out, him being the guy, but he was afforded the opportunity to do it. This is almost the Bradley Beal argument, where we're asking guys to consider compromising generational wealth to stay in a good situation. And for Jalen Brunson, it's really a dollars and cents argument, because the Knicks would be offering him the same money over 4 years that the Dallas Mavericks would be offering over 5 years. So you shed an additional year, you preserve 1 more year, perhaps, of your prime form. You can cash in again later. So it's obviously a much more prudent basketball decision. I don't think it means that Jalen Brunson doesn't prioritize winning and he doesn't prioritize staying competitive. He believes that he's going to continue to ascend and he's going to build off of this momentum. It's almost like Dennis Schroeder when he was with the Lakers. The only difference is Jalen Brunson actually converted on his opportunity. We all remember Dennis Schroeder turned down the Lakers' 4-year, $84 million offer because he was seeking something in the range of $100 million plus. And obviously flamed out in the postseason, didn't have a great regular season. Jalen Brunson, it was the opposite. His stock rose. It appreciated in the postseason. And he already had a really good regular season, but he turned down a 4-year, $55 million offer midway through the year and instead bet on himself to perform well down the stretch. And he did. And now he's going to double his earnings. So it was a similar situation, but Jalen Brunson actually executed it. And so this is, I think, an important note is Jalen Brunson is obviously a really humble NBA player. By all accounts, seems to be a great guy. In fact, I actually have friends from college that went to high school with him. They're all from Chicago, and he shows a lot of humility. He's hardworking. He's committed everywhere he's been. In fact, he's still dating his high school sweetheart. They've been together since high school. So he's a very committed individual. And I think that character-wise, the Knicks would be gaining a tremendous piece from a character perspective. And I'm all for him getting his money. And as much money as he can collect, I am all for it. But I do think that off-season signings do reveal a lot about a team's intentions and what their goals are, what direction they're going in for the future. Because when you say, okay, what's the goal of the season? Is it to win games? Is it to be competitive? Is it to be entertaining? Is it to attract spectators? In the Knicks case, is it to build up and elicit some excitement coming into the season for the Knicks fans? I think that for the Knicks, because even if they do sign Brunson, I think their ceiling is probably with this roster, this current roster, their ceiling is maybe scrapping the playoffs, maybe the play-in tournament. The Eastern Conference is loaded. I think there is an inherent ceiling with Jalen Brunson. I think they need another substantial piece to really make some noise. And I think that this would more be a desperate move to try and satisfy and allay a fan base that has been starving and salivating for something to root for. This is a Knicks fan base that has been dehydrated. They are standing in the middle of an oasis in the desert, and the well is leaking and draining rapidly. They're running out of things to root for. I think that the Knicks making the postseason 2 years ago was the biggest tease for that fan base because it gave them hope that perhaps there's a future around this core. And instead, they obviously flamed out. So I think that this is a desperate attempt, a flailing attempt to try and entice a fan base that needs something to cheer for. And again, this is no knock on Jalen Brunson. I absolutely think he is a fantastic player. I think he's a great character guy. I'm all for him getting all the money he can. But if you're the Knicks, if you're telling me, if you're trying to sell the fan base that your future core is R.J. Barrett, Jalen Brunson, Emmanuel Quickley, and Julius Randle, that's not exactly a recipe for a championship. That's a recipe to perhaps be entertaining and perhaps to still retain Spike Lee's specter at the Garden. But outside of that, I don't necessarily see what else you're going to do with Jalen Brunson and the Knicks. They need more than that. But again, happy for Brunson if that ultimately is the deal that he's offered, because he deserves all the money that he can get. Which is why I want to shift over now to Dallas's perspective. We talked about the Knicks, talked about Jalen Brunson, but I do think that an important question to ask is what this would mean for the Dallas Mavericks if they would lose him, and also who would be the best fits to replace him if he were to leave. And I think from Dallas's perspective, they're in a very peculiar and precarious situation because Dallas is in a bind here. This is a team that just reached the Western Conference Finals, and they're on the verge of losing their second best player that helped lead them to a place they haven't been in over a decade, since Dirk Nowitzki's Dallas Mavericks won the NBA Finals in 2011. That was the last time that the Mavericks had even reached the Western Conference Finals, 11 years ago. And yes, Tim Hardaway Jr. is coming back. He did not play at all last postseason, rather. Yes, I like the trade for Christian Wood, a versatile big who can stretch the floor and shoot. Yes, you still have Spencer Dinwiddie coming off the bench, but what you need and what Jalen Brunson provided was an additional secondary playmaker, sturdy ball handler, a playmaker that can create not only for himself but for others to relieve Luka at times. The Mavericks had their most success not only when Luka was playing well, but especially when the ball was moving, when there had some energy to it. Other guys were getting shots. Other guys were creating for one another. Drive and kick, open three. That's what made the Mavericks beat the Phoenix Suns. It's what allowed them to reach the Western Conference Finals. It wasn't simply Luka now, Luka forever. They needed some more playmaking. And I think that a lot of people are going to draw the comparison between the Mavericks last season and the Atlanta Hawks from 2 years ago, reaching the Eastern Conference Finals. And I think that it's different, but there are some similarities. And even though most people expected not the Hawks necessarily to return to the Eastern Conference Finals, they thought they'd be a little bit better to start the season. But the similarity is that their recipe for success, the run that they had, wasn't sustainable. It wasn't built to be repeated. And I think that's the thing with Dallas is, yes, they just made the Western Conference Finals, but I don't think that run is necessarily repeatable. I don't think it's sustainable. I don't think you say, well, because we have Luka and because if we can re-sign Jalen Brunson or not, that we're automatically shoo-ins to reach the Western Conference Finals. That's not how this team operates. A lot in the eyes of many, the Mavericks kind of reached the Western Conference Finals perhaps slightly because of a fluke and more because of how we lamented the way the Phoenix Suns crumbled down the stretch of that series. And there are a lot of good teams returning in the Western Conference this season. The Clippers are coming back. Obviously, the Warriors, the Nuggets are going to be healthier. Obviously, yes, Mavericks will still be in it. The Grizzlies, another year under their belt. The Timberwolves, the Pelicans are a better team. Who knows what the Lakers are going to do? There are a lot of good teams vying for the top spot, and they're not that far apart. So for the Dallas Mavericks, for me, this is a really interesting offseason for them. I know they've been rumored to target Luka's Slovenian teammate, Goran Dragic. Provides ball handling duties. Is he an upgrade over Jalen Brunson? No. But their biggest Achilles heel last season wasn't their defense, wasn't their lack of shooting. It was their lack of playmaking, their lack of creators. So for the Mavericks, the interesting thing is with the free agents out there, the only guys who I thought could be interesting ideas and serviceable parts to replace Brunson, one, are the two or the main people are the two biggest distressed assets in the NBA, Kyrie Irving and James Harden. Those two guys, funny enough, ironically enough, are the two most intriguing pieces that I think could replace Jalen Brunson. Kyrie Irving with his shooting, with his ball handling, the fact that he prefers to play off the ball as a point guard masquerading as a shooting guard, essentially masquerading as a shooting guard. Harden, I think, could play a little bit off the ball with Luka, but those two guys obviously are wild cards and they come with their own baggage. So if you're not going to pursue those two guys, which they likely won't, perhaps you look at a sign and trade with the Charlotte Hornets for Miles Bridges. Miles Bridges straight up for Jalen Brunson. Well, why would the Hornets and Miles Bridges want to do this? Well, Miles Bridges, he gets his money, which is what he's coveting. He's coveting that max contract that the Hornets don't appear willing to pay him. So he gets his money. The Hornets receive a guard in Jalen Brunson, who's an upgrade over Terry Rozier, who's a sturdier ball handler. He can help relieve LaMelo Ball. I think he could play in the backcourt well with LaMelo Ball. You move off of Terry Rozier. And the Mavericks, again, they get a big wing who can shoot, who's athletic, who's dynamic. He's got his money. He'd be motivated. You retain the size and the athleticism. And now you got a really big Mavericks team. That's one option. You could potentially look at, obviously Bradley Beal is the most ideal piece, but he could fit almost anywhere. That's just the way that he plays, his style, his shooting. He would be a huge asset for any team to collect Bradley Beal's services. Perhaps you do a trade with the Memphis Grizzlies. I've thought about this. Perhaps a Tyus Jones and Desmond Bane type of trade for Jalen Brunson, because Memphis, again, you get an upgrade over Tyus Jones, another backcourt player with Ja Morant who can shoot it, who can create for himself and for others. The Mavericks get a sturdy point guard in Tyus Jones who can create, obviously not as well. And you get Desmond Bane, who's a physical shooter. He can hit the three ball. He can defend. He's ascending as a young player in the NBA. Perhaps that's a trade that you look at and you entertain. But again, Dallas is in a pickle here because there aren't many great free agents out there. They did just reach the Western Conference Finals. They're trying to build off of that momentum that they had from last season, and yet they're on the verge of losing their second best guy. So I do think they need another elite playmaker. I'm not sure who it's going to be. I listed out some of the better fits, but it's an interesting situation and dilemma that the Mavericks are in, because Jalen Brunson's absence really does leave a bit. It could leave, assuming he leaves, a big void and vacancy in that roster that they would need to patch up very quickly. All right, so I want to transition now to tennis. This was a big story. Serena Williams. It was a bigger story, the fact that Serena Williams was merely returning to play at Wimbledon, her first match in a year. And now it's becoming the next biggest story that she lost yesterday in her first matchup in a year, playing at the All England Lawn Club, the most prestigious tennis tournament in the world, the oldest tennis tournament in the world, Wimbledon. And she lost to Harmony Tan, player ranked 115th in 3 sets. Lost 7-5, 6-1, 7-6, 10-7 in the 10-point tiebreak. A match that lasted over 3 hours. And even Serena Williams actually had a chance to serve for the match. She was up 5-4 in the third set, was serving for the match and couldn't hold on and lost in the 10-point tiebreak. Now, again, her opponent was someone in Harmony Tan who, as I mentioned, ranked 115th, was making her main draw debut at Wimbledon. This would be just the third time that she's advanced past the first round at a Grand Slam. And it always poses the question when you see these greats as they get up in age lose in earlier stages of Grand Slams, whether or not they'll ever return there or get a chance at winning and competing for another Grand Slam. I think that Serena Williams is in an interesting situation because obviously she's 40 years old. She's won 23 Grand Slams, the most ever in the Open era. Obviously, Margaret Court has won 24. But again, the time period that she was playing, there was less competition. We kind of know the differences between the two. And it's not that Serena Williams outwardly said she was going to retire. She didn't dispel retirement, though. She was just unsure about what her future was going to be. And I love Serena Williams. I would love to see her be able to prevail and win another Grand Slam, just like I would Federer. I do think she still has some gas in the tank. I don't think that it is entirely impossible for her to win another Grand Slam. I'm never going to say never with a champion, with a player like that. But I don't see it. I don't see her winning another Grand Slam. And I think the reason is because of the way that she wins points and the way that she's winning matches. There are really only 2 ways at this stage of her career that she's able to win matches. The first is through overpowering her opponents and ending points early, trying to have short point sequences. And the other is through sheer will and competitive spirit and just the aura absorbing her opponent so much that she's able to prevail and triumph, which is a real thing. Because unfortunately, the reality for her is any time points are extended and they become long rallies, she doesn't win those long rallies. She can't win those long rallies anymore. which is understandable why your body kind of atrophies over time. Your endurance isn't quite the same. It wanes, the flexibility, everything goes. It's understandable. She's been playing on the pro tour since technically she was 17, although she's been training for tennis since she was 5. And so you just look at yesterday's matchup, for example. Now, in fairness to her, although it didn't look like she was moving as well, I'm going to give her a pass because, again, she was coming off an injury. She hasn't played an official match in a year. So her mobility, her movement, the rust, that's all going to look a lot more fluid. She's going to look a lot cleaner of a player. Setting aside that, you look at the way that she was playing, and she lost 16 of 24 points on rallies that extended beyond 9 shots. Now, you could say part of that's just an endurance and a fatigue thing that she'll get back the more she plays. The other part of it is that's not her style. That's not how she was winning points at the peak of her power. She was winning because she was dominating, just overpowering opponents. The brute strength that she has, the physicality that she plays with, that's what's unmatched. That's what's unrivaled. And so you combine that with the fact that there's some great competition out there. Iga Swiatek, the world's #1 player, has been on a tear. I think she's won 37 straight matches, something crazy like that. And she's gotten close. Her last Grand Slam was the Australian Open in 2017. Now, once she officially gave birth, which, by the way, when she won that Australian Open, she was in the first trimester of her pregnancy, which is pretty unbelievable. It really is outstanding. But since then, since she's given birth to her child in 2018, she's actually in 14 Grand Slams reached the finals 4 times, including 2 other times at Wimbledon, 2018, 2019. So I'm certainly not going to write it off forever like it's impossible, but I just have my doubts and I have my reservations now. And it's no knock on her because Serena Williams is the greatest female tennis player of all time. She is arguably the greatest athlete of all time, let alone female athlete of all time. And that's not hyperbolic to say that. Men, women, doesn't matter. When you look at sheer dominance in a respective sport, Serena Williams is incredible. And it's just the reality is she's 40 now, coming off a major injury, hasn't played in a year. It's natural that there's going to be a little bit of a drop off, a little bit of a decline. And again, I still think she maybe has a couple more runs in her at some of these majors. I'm not going to count it out, but on the percentage scale of 10 being yes, I think she's going to win, 1, never going to win another Grand Slam again. Probably more at a 3, 2.5, 3 at this point. I would love to be wrong. I would love for nothing more than to be wrong and for her to win, because that's how much appreciation I have for her and the sport. And I love seeing great players continue to rewrite history and to break records or to set new records as well. I would love for all of that and then some for her. Just have my doubts about it. Just have my doubts about it. All right, final topic. My Malkins moments. Have a couple great Malkins moments for you. So obviously this is the off season for both the NBA and the NFL, and you're seeing a lot of big contracts being signed, especially in the NFL. And the latest off-season signee, Terry McLaurin for the Washington Commanders, just signed a 3-year, $71 million extension to remain with the Washington Commanders. Now, here's the interesting thing. His signing bonus was $28 million. And just for some context, that signing bonus alone is actually the largest signing bonus ever paid for a wide receiver for Terry McLaurin. This is a guy who not only is now in the top 5 as far as salaries for the wide receiver position. This is a guy drafted in 2019 out of Ohio State, and literally since his rookie year has instantly become the Commanders' best wideout. He's a fantastic, fantastic player, is only going to continue to get better. The beauty of a contract like this is he retains flexibility moving forward. It doesn't lock him up for 5-6 years. He'll have another opportunity to sign at least one other big contract. Still a very young guy. So $28 million signing bonus, though the largest ever for a wide receiver. That is worthy of making a Malkin's moment. Second Malkin's moment, Xander Schauffele. He won the Travelers Championship. Travelers Championship is, obviously it's not a major in golf, but it's one of the bigger tournaments on the PGA Tour. Ultimately only shot 3 bogeys, finished minus 19 for the tournament. It was his 6th career win. Now, I'm not going to touch on today a lot of the players defecting for the LIV tournament because I don't want to take away what Schauffele and some of these guys have been able to achieve on the PGA Tour. They're controlling what they'd like to control, and Xander Schauffele deserves a lot of credit for that. And finally, in baseball, Vladimir Guerrero Jr. knocked in a walk-off against the Red Sox last night for the Blue Jays to win 6-5. Here's the amazing thing about Vladimir Guerrero Jr. This is a guy who's only been in the league for 3.5 years. This is his 4th year. He's batting .271 this season with 18 home runs, 74 hits, 42 runs, .505 slug percentage. Now, again, this is the middle of his 4th year in the MLB, and he's already got 90 home runs. So not only were you able to knock in a walk-off against your division rival, but now it's starting to translate to wins because the Blue Jays are actually starting to do something in the MLB. Obviously, they are in the American League. They got the 3rd best record in the American League behind the Yankees and the Astros, and the 7th best record overall in baseball. And he has proven to be the big catalyst behind that. So major shout out to him and all 3 of those guys. Well, that's all the time that I got for today. Thank you so much for joining me right here on Morning Joe every single Monday and Wednesday morning, 11 a.m. to 12 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, 10 to 11 Central, and 8 to 9 a.m. Pacific. Make sure to subscribe to my YouTube page, Morning Joe, J-O, with Jonah Malkin on YouTube. Follow me on Twitter at Jonah_Malkin or at morning_Joe_, JMalk97 on Instagram, and Jonah Malkin on TikTok. Thanks so much. And as always, have a lovely rest of your morning and a happy upcoming 4th of July weekend.